Imagine an enemy that doesn't just kill you, it eats you. It moves faster than a cheetah, it can climb walls like a spider, and it shoots bone spikes from its tentacles that can pin a human to a wall from 50 yards away. In the year 2051, these alien creatures, known as white spikes, have hunted the human race down to the brink of extinction. To survive, the last humans on Earth have broken the laws of physics and used the time travel technology to jump back to the present to draft an army to fight these aliens. The perfect recruit for this slaughter is Dan Forrester. He is an ex-Green Beret currently rotting away as a high school biology teacher, deeply dissatisfied with his life. Feeling overqualified for teaching, he applies for a prestigious research position at a private lab. However, since the lab directors prefer candidates with traditional academic backgrounds over military experience, his application is rejected. This professional failure causes Dan to spiral into a fit of rage, witnessed by his young daughter, Muri, and his wife, Emmy. Driven by this rejection, Dan feels an intense need to prove his worth and leave a legacy, unaware that the legacy waiting for him involves fighting a war 30 years in the future. The trajectory of the entire world changes during a televised World Cup soccer match. With humanity in the year 2051 facing a total extinction event, soldiers from the future utilize time-link technology to materialize on the field during the game to maximize global visibility. These soldiers, led by Lieutenant Hart, reveal that the white spikes have annihilated the global population, leaving fewer than 50,000 survivors. Having run out of soldiers in their own timeline, they have come to the past to recruit their ancestors to fight a war that hasn't happened yet. As months pass, the global situation becomes desperate. With the survival rate for those sent to the future at a dismal 30%, the world's standing armies are rapidly depleted. This resource shortage forces the government to start drafting ordinary people. The war arrives for Dan right in his classroom when he receives a mandatory notice on his phone. Since the time-link technology is susceptible to the grandfather paradox, the military utilizes a specific conscription algorithm. They only draft individuals who are already dead by the year 2051. After a scan reveals that Dan is destined to die in only 7 years, in the year 2030, he meets the criteria for service. Consequently, a permanent metal tracker is clamped onto his arm. Fused to his biology, it cannot be removed without killing him, effectively tethering his life to the military's timeline. Emmy, desperate to save her husband from a death sentence, urges Dan to seek out his estranged father, James. As a paranoid engineer, James is the only one with the skills to hack the military tracker. James suspects Dan is a government agent, and due to their mutual lack of trust, Dan refuses his father's help and walks away. As a result, Dan is forced to report to duty, realizing the only way to protect his family from the legal consequences of desertion is to survive the 7-day tour.
At the training facility, Dan is introduced to the mechanics of the war. Since the white spikes enter a dormant state every 6 days, the military uses this window to cycle troops in and out of the future. During training, Dan befriends Charlie, a nervous scientist, and Dorian, a hardened veteran on his 3rd tour. Dorian has terminal cancer and reveals he keeps returning to the future because he wants to die in battle rather than in a hospital bed. The training period is supposed to last a week, but after the last major research facility in 2051 comes under sudden attack, the recruits are rushed to the portal early. With the time-link technology unstable and the future falling apart, a coordinate error occurs during the jump. Instead of landing on a secure platform, the recruits materialize at a terrifying height over the ruins of Miami. Dozens of recruits fall to their deaths on the concrete below. Dan is plummeting toward the ground, watching his teammates smash into the buildings around him. Real quick, the squad is being decimated before they even fire a shot. I'm building this channel, Rule Number 1 recaps from the ground up. If you're enjoying this journey to the future, hit that subscribe button. Rule number 1 is we never leave a subscriber behind. Alright, let's see if Dan survives the fall. Dan and Charlie only survive because they happen to fall into a rooftop swimming pool, which breaks their impact. Once they regroup, Dan is contacted by Romeo Command. As the only person on the roof with significant military experience, he is promoted to squad leader. Their mission is a combat search and rescue to retrieve a research team trapped in a nearby lab. As they move through the city, they discover that the research team is already dead. The white spikes are highly intelligent and hunt by scent, using the scientists' bodies as a trap to lure in the rescue squad. While under fire, Dan is ordered to ignore the bodies and retrieve the biological samples and data drives. As the squad attempts to exit the building, they have their first direct encounter with the white spikes. The aliens have armored hides and fire lethal projectiles from their tails, making standard rifles almost useless. However, during the struggle, Dorian reminds Dan that the only weak points are the neck and the underbelly. This tactical breakthrough allows the survivors to kill several aliens, but the noise attracts the rest of the hive. The situation becomes a race against time as the military authorizes a cleansing airstrike to destroy Miami and its infestation. With only minutes until the bombers arrive, the squad reaches the street, but their extraction vehicles are destroyed by a white spike ambush. They are forced to flee on foot toward a nearby tunnel. With the aliens closing in, 2 injured members realize they are too hurt to escape. They choose to stay behind as a distraction. This sacrifice helps the rest of the squad survive the scene just as F-22 Raptors level the city.
After surviving the blast, Dan is transported to a forward operating base. Having successfully retrieved the lab samples, he is granted a private meeting with the commander of the R-Force, Colonel Miri Forrester. Upon seeing her, Dan is shocked to realize the colonel is his own daughter, now fully grown. Miri has spent her entire adult life in a dying world, making her cold and professional toward the younger version of her father. She reveals that she specifically rigged the draft to ensure he would be sent to her. This revelation sets the stage for their mission. Miri needs Dan's help to develop a toxin that can kill the female white spikes, which are the key to the aliens' reproduction. Since Miri's current toxin only kills males, she realizes the war is mathematically unwinnable unless they target the reproductive females. Consequently, she initiates a high-risk extraction mission to a massive alien nest in a cavern. As the female white spikes are the most guarded assets of the species, Miri and her team must descend into the heart of the hive, while the military provides a perimeter. During the extraction, the female awakens and emits a high-frequency distress call. Telepathically received by every male in the vicinity, thousands of white spikes swarm the position. Dan refuses to let his daughter face the horde alone, breaking formation to jump into the nest and secure the cage. Driven by his tactical intervention, they successfully lift the female out via helicopter, though the swarm manages to take down several escort aircraft. This narrow escape forces the survivors to relocate to a fortified offshore oil platform, which houses the R-Force's main lab and the only remaining jump-link portal. While safely on the rig, the emotional wall between Dan and Miri finally crumbles. Confused by her resentment, Dan listens as Miri reveals the dark history of their family. Dan could not cope with his perceived failures in 2022 and became a shell of himself, eventually abandoning his family before dying in 2030. This revelation acts as a massive psychological catalyst for Dan. Horrified by the man he is destined to become, he doubles his efforts to help Miri finish the toxin. He realizes that by saving the world, he is also fighting for his own redemption. They finally identify the correct chemical sequence to bond with the female's unique DNA. As the computer confirms a 100% match, they successfully synthesize a viable toxin. However, the captured female has spent her time on the rig calling for her protectors, and the ocean platform is suddenly swarmed by a massive colony of males. The white spikes are willing to drown themselves to create bridges for others to climb, and they quickly scale the rig's legs and breach the command center. The platform's defenses collapse as the sheer volume of aliens is too great for the automated turrets. Realizing the future timeline is already doomed, Murray makes a strategic decision. Dan is the only one who can take the toxin back to 2022 to prevent the war from ever starting. She forces him toward the jump link. During the frantic race to the helipad, Murray is wounded. The rig is exploding and the jump link is on its final countdown. Murray urges Dan to leave her behind. In a moment of desperation, an alien drags Murray toward the edge of the rig. Dan leaps after her, but he is in midair when the timer hits 0. As a result, the jump link pulls him back to 2022 while Murray falls into the inferno. Dan materializes in the past, clutching the only vial of the toxin, but he is met with devastating news. Since the future portal was destroyed in the explosion, the link is permanently severed. Consequently, the government officially halts the draft and abandons the war effort, believing that without a portal, there is nothing more that can be done. Refusing to let Murray's sacrifice be in vain, Dan ignores the government's surrender. He enlists Charlie and Dorian to investigate the origin of the aliens, focusing on the fact that no one in 2051 ever found a spaceship. Dorian still has the white spike claw he took as a trophy in Miami, so they analyze it in a lab. Charlie discovers traces of volcanic ash embedded in the sediment of the claw. Since this ash belongs to the Millennium eruption of 946 AD, they deduce the aliens have been on Earth for over 1,000 years. Dan consults his student, Martin, who explains that the ash can be found in the permafrost of northern Russia. By cross-referencing global temperature charts with the 2048 outbreak, they realize that climate change and melting glaciers are what finally wake the hibernating creatures. This revelation changes everything. Since the aliens are currently frozen and dormant, they can be killed now. However, because the US government won't risk an international incident by invading Russia, Dan is forced to reconcile with his father, James. James has an untraceable aircraft and a deep distrust of the state, so he agrees to fly Dan's team to the Arctic. Upon reaching the Russian glacier, the team uses explosives to descend into the ice. They find a massive magnetic anomaly and eventually discover a crashed alien vessel. Inside the cockpit, they find the original pilots, a different alien race that died in the crash. Since the white spikes are found in cargo pods, Dan realizes they were never the pilots. They were planet-cleansing biological weapons meant to eradicate life for a colonizing race. As the team begins injecting the dormant pods with the toxin, the dying screams of the aliens wake the rest of the hive. This triggers a catastrophic firefight in the narrow corridors. Being overwhelmed, Dorian, who is already dying of cancer, chooses to stay behind with a large stockpile of C4. His sacrifice destroys the entire ship and the hive, ensuring he dies on his own terms. However, one alpha female manages to survive and flee to the surface, leaving Dan and James to pursue her on snowmobiles.
The final confrontation occurs on the snowy plains. Since the Queen is immune to standard gunfire, Dan realizes he must use the toxin directly. James distracts the creature, but the Queen is faster and nearly kills him. This prompts Dan to leap onto the creature's back, stabbing her with a poisoned claw. Dan is finally acting as the man he was meant to be. He manages to jam the final vial of toxin into the Queen's mouth and kick her off a cliff. As a result of the Queen's death, the entire species is eradicated in 2022. With the war stopped at its source, the horrific future of 2051 is officially erased. The story concludes with Dan returning home to Emmy and little Muri. Having seen the man he could have become, Dan decides to never abandon his family, effectively changing his own personal history and the fate of the entire world. That was the Tomorrow War. Dan Forrester erased an entire timeline just to save his daughter's life in the past. If you respect a father who will rewrite history to protect his family, hit the like button. It honors the sacrifice and helps us build this fortress from the ground up. But here is the real debate. Was it right to erase the future version of Muri? He saved her life, but he technically killed the hero she became. Let me know your verdict in the comments. Rule number 1 is we never leave a subscriber in a dying timeline. Hit that subscribe button to join the Survivor Squad. This is rule number 1 recaps. Watch the sky.